Korea's pleasure squad. In North Korea, if a young woman has a decent height, good skin, pretty face with a decent family background, she's almost certain to be selected as part of Kim's regime's pleasure squad.
Kim Seo-ah was chosen young. She was told to be silent. But now, a former insider says she cannot stay quiet another day. This is her account: how selection begins in classrooms, how tests strip away dignity, and how one choice to run changed everything. Her message is simple: believe me before it's too late. Did a state-run pleasure squad really exist? Who did the choosing? And how were girls screened? Why do survivors say their families paid the heaviest price? Today, we hear a voice that risked everything to speak, chosen from the classroom. The story begins not with a choice, but with a summons. For many girls in Pyongyang,
having intimacy with teenage young girls gave them immortality. Kim Jong-il used this pleasure squad to ensure that his succession. So they take these young girls and go for medical exam.
adolescence carried a shadow that outsiders could hardly imagine. Teachers, instructors, and party officials sometimes appeared at schools without warning. They stood at the front of classrooms, clipboard in hand, calling students forward one by one. It looked like a health check. In reality, it was a scouting process that, survivors say, could change or destroy a girl's life. Reports, including one cited by NDTV, claim that every year about 25 girls were handpicked for what the regime called the pleasure squad. The criteria centered on beauty, family background, and loyalty. Girls with good songbun, politically reliable families, were considered safe candidates. They could be trusted not to rebel, and their relatives could be punished if they did. Once chosen, girls were divided into groups: performers, service workers, and those allegedly reserved for more personal demands. After a decade, many were retired into arranged marriages with guards or state officials. For children, the fear was sharp. The survivor whose story we follow recalls being scouted as early as 11. Kim Seo-ah remembers whispers that classmates vanished for 10 or even 13 years. Some returned only when the state arranged their marriages. Others never came back at all. Mothers sometimes received sudden death notices with vague phrases like, "Your daughter served the nation." Publicly, being chosen was described as an honor. Privately, parents wept. The process itself was relentless. If you were tall, you were called. If your posture looked graceful, you were called. If your face matched a vague ideal set by party men, you were called. She remembers being measured for height, weight, and the line of her legs. Officials ordered girls to turn front, then back, like mannequins. Refusal was unthinkable. To say no was disobedience to the party, a betrayal punishable not just for the girl, but for her entire family. It was a terrible psychological war. She prayed not to be selected, having already heard the accounts. Yet part of her wondered, if I have to go, maybe there is food there. Chronically starving through the 1990s and 2000s, North Korea was rife with whispers that the squad members partook of imported goodies, foreign hidden substances, and cosmetics inaccessible to mere mortals. Survival itself began to take perverse allure. Yet, these rumors were double-edged. One neighbor had said that her cousin labored for 10 years cleaning bathrooms for the upper-class residents. 10 years of silence and scrubbing floors in an utterly different world. Another one claimed that a childhood friend had worked as an aide somewhere around senior officials, enjoying privileges unimaginable for a commoner. They did not know which one to believe, or whether you'd come back at all. This uncertainty alone became a tool for control. Kim Seo-ah keeps bringing to her mind the times that different scouts have summoned her twice in a week. The first one measured her height and asked for her father's party status. The next one examined her skin for scars, and she thought all was lost when they found a small stitch mark underneath her chin. However, she was again told that is acceptable. Another girl dismissed had a faintly visible injection scar on her hip. The selection was absolutely arbitrary. By the age when students were completing high school, she had grown accustomed to being called, tested, and sent home, only to be summoned again and again, this time with instructions to report to a restricted hospital reserved for the senior party members. That, she realized, was the point of no return. Parents were meant to be thankful, daughters were to be loyal, but everyone knew what that meant: separation, silence, and loss of control of your own future. I knew, she would say later, that once I walked into that building, my life would never again be my own. And stepping through that door led straight into the next ordeal: the examinations that survivors say no one can ever forget. The tests no one forgets. For those who passed the first round of selection, the ordeal was only beginning. Classroom summons and clipboard inspections were humiliating enough, but the next stage, the official medical examinations, burned themselves into memory in ways no survivor ever forgets. The young woman whose story we follow described them not as checkups, but as tests of loyalty disguised as health screenings. Refusal was impossible, compliance was degrading, and the consequences shaped the rest of her life. She was 17 when the order came. After years of being pulled from class for height checks and weight records, she was told to report to one of Pyongyang's restricted hospitals, the kind where only senior party members and elites received treatment. Ordinary citizens never set foot inside. The hallways were stocked with imported medicines from aid shipments, substances her family could never dream of. The supplies themselves reminded her how much power and privilege were at play. The group of candidates was small, about 10 girls, all from Pyongyang. Each had already survived multiple rounds of scrutiny. These final tests were designed to separate the acceptable from the unworthy. Here, the process became invasive, stripping away not only clothes, but dignity. At first came routine checks: height, weight, blood pressure, vision. Then the tone shifted. Officials from the central party entered, lining up along the back wall. Commands followed: face front, face back, turn around. The girls stood in silence, unable to meet one another's eyes. Then came the order to undress. Many hesitated, clinging to what little modesty they had left. A cadre barked at them, warning that disobedience meant betrayal of the state. In that moment, the girls understood. This wasn't about health, it was about submission. The survivor recalls the coldness of the process. A male doctor conducted the most intimate checks, assisted by a silent female nurse. The candidates shuffled forward one by one. The fear in the room was not simply of the doctor, but of what refusal would mean for their families. If I resisted, it wasn't just me who would suffer, she said years later. My parents would be punished, maybe worse, so she complied, thinking only of finishing quickly and going home. Minor physical imperfections may also cause rejection of a person. Dismissed for a nearly invisible surgical scar in her hip, which resulted from an injection she got a long time ago when she was little. Another was told that she had poor posture and was sent away. The survivor is quite concerned regarding a little stitch mark she has under her chin, but has been told that it is not a big deal. The feeling was that the process was capricious and cruel, not intended to measure, but to remind every girl of her frailty. Most degrading was the so-called virginity test, a treatment couched in vague clinicalities, but severely humiliating. For girls, it left them baffled and terrified. Too young to appreciate the exact scenario, the survivor only knew it was something to survive, not question. Questions were for losers. What struck her most, years later, was how it turned instantly from shame into numbness. At that age, I couldn't even be embarrassed in that length of time. All I could think was, finish quickly, don't make trouble, don't make my mom and dad suffer. Only later, looking back, did I feel the shame. Whispers ran rampant about why the exams were so invasive. Rumors said authoritative official Jang Song-thaek had been supervising the whole process, requesting demands of the very strictest order. After his execution in 2013, there were claims that some rituals had stopped. True or not, these legends revealed the secrecy rotting the system and the powerlessness of the girls. For the survivor, those visits to the hospital marked both the beginning and end. She was no longer just a student in a box. Kim Seo-ah entered an establishment in which her body no longer belonged to her, obedience having been extracted through humiliation, and silence was demanded at all stages. The exams had done their jobs well. They had not just tested their level of health, However, they had manacled their will, and once the will is broken, training begins. Less about health and more about teaching you how to smile on command. Training the perfect smile. If the medical tests were designed to break the spirit, the next stage was meant to rebuild it, but only in the image the regime desired. After passing final examinations, the young women entered training. It was not a school in the traditional sense. It was a conditioning camp, where every gesture, movement, and expression was molded. Survivors say it was about one thing above all else: erasing individuality and replacing it with performance. From dawn until late at night, schedules were filled with practice. Dance rehearsals taught grace and control. Song lessons drilled patriotic anthems into memory. Etiquette classes dictated how to walk, bow, and pour tea without sound. Girls learned to keep their backs straight, heads inclined, and smiles steady, no matter how exhausted or afraid they felt. One survivor recalled being told, "Your smile is not yours anymore. It belongs to the state." The training was relentless. A misplaced step or a flat note could mean hours of repetition under watchful eyes. The goal was not just entertainers, it was symbols of perfection. The girls were told that when they performed, they represented not themselves, but the dignity of the leadership. Their beauty, their voices, and their movements all had to project loyalty. But the program was not only about performance. Survivors describe a parallel track of service training, massage lessons, etiquette for serving high-ranking officials, and even how to hold polite conversation without revealing anything personal. These tasks were framed as honors. To serve at the table of a senior leader was described as a privilege. In reality, it was another form of control. The system kept girls close to power, but never part of it. Over time, a hierarchy emerged. Some were trained purely for talent, to sing magnificently and dance exquisitely at banquets. Others were bled into supporting roles or attended powerful men, prepared their rooms, or performed other tasks behind the scenes. The most perfect contestants, who were chosen for appearance and demeanor, were kept closest to elite figures. It was subtle sorting, but everyone knew it was taking place. Rivalries formed, though no one dared speak of them. Rumors became another sort of discipline. Whispers that those who went higher still assumed enjoyed luxuries unimaginable by ordinary people imported food, cosmetics, and even jewelry. They heard tales of better living quarters, more protection, and a future in a higher marriage. But darker rumors also circulated. Girls for a decade condemned to scrub floors, never seen again. Hope and fear traveled closely together. Survivors described training as a process of suffocating influences through compulsion on emotional silence. The girls were required to appear jovial, disciplined, and show gratitude for everything. Complaining was dangerous. Crying was weakness. Friendships were tenuous. Anyone could be a spy. A survivor said she learned to smile when her stomach turned, and to laugh on cue even when she really wanted to collapse. It wasn't just acting, she explained. It was survival. Looking back, she said now that a race wasn't about how exhausting it was. Each day, a part of her disappeared. What she liked and what her dreams were no longer mattered. What mattered was how she looked when carrying out the bow, how steady her smile appeared to those above her, because, by the end, she had barely recognized herself. They had trained the girls for their purpose. They were no longer pupils, dragged from classrooms. They were shiny tools of obedience, individuality buried under performance. Just when she thought she had come to terms with it, there was this. Some of them would not stay in Pyongyang. Some of them were to be sent overseas, for restaurants and cultural troupes, where outsiders would see them, having no idea what lay behind those perfect smiles. For her, that foreign assignment became both a different kind of prison and the first glimpse of freedom, an overseas posting that opened her eyes to life beyond the regime's control. A different cage. After years of inspections, training, and rehearsals, she thought her fate was sealed inside Pyongyang. But instead of a permanent posting near the leadership, she received unexpected orders. She would be sent overseas. On paper, it sounded like an honor. In practice, it became another cage, this one with neon lights, humid air, and the constant temptation of freedom just beyond her reach. Kim's Seo-ah destination was Cambodia, a country she had only read about in textbooks. She was assigned to one of the regime's overseas restaurants, places that served traditional food, staged cultural performances, and funneled profits back to Pyongyang. The moment she stepped off the plane, the heat hit her like a wall. Gone was the icy gray of North Korea. Here, palm trees swayed above crowded streets, motorbikes zipped past, and foreign languages buzzed in her ears. It was overwhelming and intoxicating at once. At first, the novelty distracted her. Air conditioners hummed inside restaurants and hotels, a luxury she had never experienced. Customers wore bright clothes, laughed freely, and pulled out cash and credit cards as if money had no limit. To someone raised on rationing and silence, it felt like stepping onto another planet. Yet, her own life remained locked down. Her wages told the story. The equivalent of $137 a month, more than many in North Korea, but less than half of what Cambodian staff earned. Those workers could finish shifts, grab noodles from a vendor, and head home to families. She and her colleagues returned to guarded dormitories where every outing was restricted, every move tracked. Freedom was in the air, but she could never touch it. Still, cracks formed. Tourists and expatriates, Europeans, Americans, South Koreans, filed into the restaurant. They ate kimchi, applauded the dances, and sometimes lingered to talk. One South Korean man became a regular. She told herself to stay away. From childhood, she had been taught South Koreans were enemies, spies waiting to lure her into betrayal. When she found herself enjoying his company, she scolded herself, even pinching her arm until it hurt. But the barrier was weakened. His questioning was soft, his tone void of any judgment. His discourse on freedom was a training can detangle the jargon exposition. Your path? Buy food when hungry, and say what you believe without fear. Kim Seo-ah began to wish most for those things. Even if I must be an agent, she later conceded, I'd choose the risk to have it than to be back in the deathly silence I knew. Life in Cambodia exposed her to an inequity of a kind she had never before seen, one clearly working against her. The local workers were given rights and choices far more than she ever did back in a regime that called itself superior. One evening, she saw Cambodian workers leave after payday, laughing, with bowls of soup in hand. She returned to her guarded quarters without. That moment, she said, was heavier than any reprimand she had received. The world was much bigger and freer than she had been taught. And it was so close. It was a never-ending schedule. The women nursed the guests with food, some dancing, and late into the night would practice new routines and new etiquette drills. The cycle seemed endless, but somewhere inside of her, something had changed. No training would wipe away the questions that had now settled into her mind. If others could live freely, why not herself? If freedom was so close, then why was she not allowed to take it? With all these thoughts swirling, her situation became unbearable. The bars of her cage had changed hue from cold gray of Pyongyang to tropical heat in Cambodia. But they were still bars. The moment she came to that realization was when defiance began to bloom. That seed soon grew into a plan, a decision to flee, even knowing the price might be paid not only by her but by her family back home. The decision and the price. By her fourth year overseas, the contradiction inside her had grown unbearable. Every day she danced, sang, and smiled for customers who clapped politely before returning to their free lives. Every night she returned to a guarded dormitory where even whispering doubts was dangerous. Freedom was no longer abstract. It walked past her table, laughed in the streets outside, lived in the ordinariness she was denied. Once she had seen it, she could not unsee it. The decision to escape came in waves. She recalls a South Korean acquaintance who lingered after a performance and asked softly, "Do you want to live like this forever?" She did not answer, but the question echoed for weeks. Another time, she watched Cambodian staff slip out the back door after closing, heading home to families and friends. She envied their ordinariness. To her, ordinary was luxury, the right to choose where to go, how to spend money, and whom to belong to, yourself. Planning her escape was terrifying. Surveillance was constant. Managers doubled as party minders. Every outing was logged, every letter home censored. She knew any misstep could cost her life and condemn her family in Pyongyang. Still, she began to test boundaries, timing patrols, memorizing layouts, studying co-workers' routines. Small details became lifelines. Who left early? Which doors stayed unlocked? On the night when she acted, she felt like she was stepping out of her own body. As she slipped through the side door, her hands were trembling. The humid breeze touched her cheeks, and for the first time in years, she breathed air that felt sweet. Every step felt like thunder. She prepared herself for a shout, a siren, or a hand grasping her back. None came. By dawn, she was gone. It felt not like triumph, but disbelief. "I kept thinking I would wake up," she said. Swift came the price. Oftentimes, defectors say their families have paid for their escape, and her story was no exception. Months later, she heard the word, her parents were expelled from Pyongyang. Being sent down is not just relocation, it is social death. Her father had already been sick, and the stress slew him, resulting in a heart attack. Her mother became ill in the remote province where they were sent. The survivor thinks her mother died later as well. There were no last words, no farewell. Just the pain of knowing her choice cost her family everything. The guilt was as heavy as a mountain. Some nights, she wondered if freedom had really been worth it. "I just wanted to tell them that I'm alive, that I'm safe, and I'm sorry," she recalled. But I had no way to reach them. That silence, though, was heavier than the cage that she'd escaped. Even now, she claims to carry it like a stone in her chest. But then she insisted that she could not have chosen a different alternative. It would be only silencing her, decades more of obedience, perhaps a lifetime of silence. Leaving was the only way to regain her life, even if it meant grieving afterward. The only way now to honor her parents' suffering is to honor it fully, speaking the truth out loud and not letting the institution she escaped from forget it. Her escape did not end her fear. If anything, it initiated a new danger, living in freedom while her voice could still echo as a target when heard loudly. And so she carried on, haunted by loss yet determined to speak, because the shadow of what she left behind would follow her wherever she went. Living with the shadow. Freedom did not erase the past. It carried it into every corner of her new life. In South Korea, she finally had the independence she once only dreamed of. Her own apartment, the right to walk outside without a minder, to choose where she would go and whom she would meet. Yet, with freedom came a new weight. The shadow of her past never left, and with it, fears that often felt as heavy as the bars of her old cage. Seo-ah chose to speak publicly. Using her real name, she gave interviews and appeared on broadcasts, determined to shed light on the system she had escaped. "If I stay silent, I am helping them," she said. But speaking carried risks. Every word could mark her as a target. Other defectors warned her not to go too far, reminding her of critics who faced threats, harassment, or suspicious accidents abroad. Their warnings only confirmed what she knew. The shadow of her former country stretched across borders. The pressure wasn't only external, it lived inside her. At night, she replayed the faces of her parents, imagining what they endured after her escape. The guilt was relentless. She reminded herself they would have wanted her to survive, but the knowledge of their suffering remained a scar no words could heal. "I feel like I am living twice," she explained, "once for me and once for them. I cannot waste the life they paid for with their own life in South Korea brought culture shock. Supermarkets overflowing with choices, public debates on television, young people laughing in cafes without fear, all astonished her. She loved these freedoms, but also felt alien. While others her age chatted casually, she caught herself watching. Too careful, still listening for the voice of authority. After years of silent obedience, it felt unnatural to speak freely, even when no one was watching. Yet the online world had another challenge for her. When her testimony was broadcast, she braced herself for some backlash. Some accused her of exaggerating, others labeled her a propagandist. For a woman who had put everything on the line to tell her side of the story, those reactions were painful. It's hard enough to tell something so humiliating. Why would I make it up? But some people are just skeptical because the truth hurts, she said. The disbelief stung, but then it became even more of a reason for her to put up a fight. If just one person listened to her and started questioning the system, then her risk was worth it. Purpose kept her going. Mere survival was not enough. She would turn her suffering into a mission. She joined groups that were documenting the testimonies of defectors and spoke at events that allowed outsiders to learn about life inside the regime. Every time she stepped on the stage, her voice trembled, but she told herself that her parents were there listening, proud of her for speaking. That belief sustained her. But the shadow was never far behind. Sometimes, when she walked alone at night, she imagined footsteps behind her. Anonymous messages that called her a liar or a traitor left a chill that lingered for hours. Her new normal was fear, really. She also kept reminding herself that silence would have been worse. I already lost my family, she said. What more can they take from me, except my voice? Freedom was great, light, safe, and brighter. Yet her past brought a hard lesson, that safety was never absolute and must be bought with an everyday fight for peace. She had escaped one cage only to live in another, built not of walls, but of memories and threats with which it could follow her anywhere. And yet, despite the fear, she chose to keep speaking, leading to the ultimate confession she now carries, her final warning before they silence her for good. The truth she refuses to bury. She opens this chapter of her story with words that freeze the room. Before they silence me, I must tell the truth. It is the way she has learned to measure her life, by the chance that speaking out could one day cost her everything. She knows the risks. Others fell silent. She refuses. Her testimony, she says, is the only weapon she has left. The message she wants to deliver is not just about her own suffering. It is about the machinery that produced it. She describes the selection process in schools, humiliating medical exams, years of training designed to erase individuality, and foreign postings that dangled freedom just out of reach. Every detail is meant to confront denial. They say it doesn't exist, she tells audiences, but I lived it. I saw it. I carried it on my own body. She also speaks directly to girls still inside the system. Many may never hear her, but she says, if someone tells you this is an honor, remember who it serves. If they say this is for your country, remember who profits from your silence. Your worth is not measured by your ability to smile for them. These words give back what she never received, acknowledgement that it was wrong. To outsiders, she offers another plea. Believe the survivors. She admits testimony can sound fragmented or inconsistent. Trauma scrambles memory, and shame often keeps details hidden. But she insists that dismissing these stories as exaggerations or fabrications only helps the system endure. You don't have to believe every rumor, she says, but you must not ignore the patterns. When so many of us tell the same story, it is because it is true. The most intimate thoughts she has ever committed to writing are reserved for her parents. She knows she can never say it straight to them, but she always tries to whisper it into the air. Sorry, I lived. I wish I could have brought you with me. I wish you could see me, free now, safe. I'm living the life you wanted for me. The pang of regret grips her, but instead, it becomes a source of power. I live twice as hard, she says, once for myself and once for them. She fears retribution every time she speaks. There have been threats made against her. She has heard of defectors tracked abroad, and she has been told to watch her back. But silence, she says, would be worse than death. If they take me, she says, at least I spoke the truth. At least the world will know Her testimony does more than expose cruelty. It also shows resilience. She built a life in the South, with her own choices and her own voice. She refuses to let fear dictate her life. Even under threat, she reclaims the humanity long denied her. That insistence is, in itself, an act of defiance. For her, speaking out is not only survival, it is victory. The system that tried to erase her instead produced a witness. And as long as she breathes, she will use her voice to document, to warn, and to resist. Her final warning is clear. What happened to her is no rumor, no whisper behind borders. It is real, and unless the world pays attention, the silence will continue to swallow others. If this testimony matters to you, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us which part you want fully expanded next. And if you want more first-hand accounts and careful fact-checking side by side, watch the video on your screen. We'll keep translating what survivors risk everything to say.